Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about another Beethoven Fifth Symphony. I know people would like the greatest recordings ever to be of, weirdo composer X's 56th string quartet or something like that. But the truth of the matter is, when you're talking about weird repertoire, you almost never know if it's one of the greatest recordings ever because we don't know the repertoire. I mean, you've got to know the work. You've got to know the potentialities of the work. You've got to know the discographic history of the work. And if there's only one recording of the work, you could say it's a fabulous recording, but one of the greatest ever? Well, that's a lot harder and less common. On the other hand, when you have a work that's been recorded 625,287 and a half times, like Beethoven's Fifth, well, it's probably very likely that a slim minority, but still a healthy handful of those recordings are going to be among the greatest recordings ever, because everybody's doing it. So as we did with some other works in this series, we're going to have to cover more than one performance. It's not like you're going to get the best. You're going to get a coterie of the best, and I want to talk about them. I've done some of this in the repertoire videos, of course, but I understand there's some people who don't want to sit through half an hour of me holding up things and saying that. And also, even in the repertoire videos, there are many recordings that we just can't cover because time doesn't permit, or I just decided not to, or, other things came along. There are all kinds of reasons. So in the interest of being as comprehensive as possible and providing as many entrees into the universe of great classical recordings as I can, I think it makes sense to revisit some of these great recordings in different series on this channel. And I wanted to make that sort of general introduction because I know that there are people who have said, well, you're only doing this, you should be doing that, which I find remarkable given the fact that I've done now about 5,100 videos. I mean, and they're certainly not all about the same thing. One of the things I have found is that most of the people who say I should be doing something else don't realize that I've already done it. It's very, very amusing. Someone recently just said to me, why don't you do a video about sinfoniettas? I mean, sinfoniettas are usually wonderful. I'll bet there's a bunch of really good ones. Well, yeah, there are. And I did a list of like 18 wonderful sinfoniettas, and it's out there if you want to go look. So, yeah, anyway, let's get to it, shall we? Beethoven's Fifth, Antal, Dorati, and the London Symphony. Unquestionably one of the great Beethoven Fives and one of the greatest recordings ever. As a result, now Dorati also comes with a fabulous pastoral symphony, by the way, and the Creatures of Prometheus Overture, and it's on Mercury Living Presence. Now, these recordings were made in 1962 and 1960, and as I said, with the London Symphony, and they sound absolutely fabulous, thanks to Wilma Cozart Fine and her husband, Robert. And they were just amazing audio people. They made stunning sounding recordings. But here's the fun thing. Dorati was not known as a Beethoven guy. He never completed this Beethoven cycle for Mercury Living Presence. He did a complete Beethoven cycle later with the Royal Philharmonic. And it's very good. But there are these particular performances, well, actually not these, but the Royal Phil performances, were the subject of a fabulous screaming fight I had with the wonderful composer-conductor Gunther Schuller, who wrote a book called The Complete Conductor. It was a really crazy polemical essay. Among its more bizarre theories was one that no instrument should be louder than the ability of the weakest instrument in the orchestra. So in other words, a low flute fortissimo should not be drowned out by fortissimo trombones or the entire string section playing fortissimo. I mean, it was nuts. I told him that. We were at Midem, in France doing the Cannes Classical Awards, and he was there. And promoting his book, and also he had some sample recordings that came with it. in which he tried to do what he said one should do. And it was a Brahms first symphony in there that was just the most awful thing you've ever heard in your life. It was so flat and so boring. I think it was recorded with the Manhattan School of Music Orchestra or something. I remember he was there at the time. But we had a fabulous afternoon together where I told him he was completely insane. And he screamed back, and we sat and had a drink. And, oh, God, it was fun. He was a terrific guy. He was a brilliant, brilliant musician. But he was a little bit nuts, just a tad. His bugbear, his bête noire was Leonard Bernstein. Partly because of the way he did not, correct the missing timpani part in the second Daphnis and Chloe suite by Ravel. And Bernstein should have. Shame on him. But that's not the point. Schuller just couldn't stand Bernstein's whole approach to music. Schuller was a strict fidelity to the score, but some of his points were very, very good ones. And he talked about what was lacking in a lot of recordings, and his iconic choice for Beethoven was Antal Dorati, the Royal Philharmonic cycle, not these, but these actually sound better, and I think they're better performances. The funny thing about it was that Dorati does not do anything like Gunther Schuller says you're supposed to do. That is, you don't hear the fortissimo flutes louder than the trombones in the finale of the Beethoven Fifth. Thank God you don't. But one thing you do hear, and one thing he was at pains to point out, and he was right, was bass lines. That there are, in classical repertoire, Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven particularly, really wonderful, active, melodic, important bass lines that have thematic substance, and you really ought to hear them. And this is a performance where you really do. It has a top-to-bottom transparency without sounding fussy or sacrificing any spontaneity. I mean, it's a lively, exciting performance, too. But it has that depth and clarity of sonority, thanks also to the recording, that's just wonderful. And, Dorati, who was a ballet guy and a Stravinsky guy, and, he wasn't supposed to be a Beethoven conductor, actually did splendid Beethoven and Brahms. And one of the reasons he did is because he understood the importance of those bass lines. And one place where you really hear it, I mean, you hear it everywhere, but one place where you really, really hear it, and what Gunther Schuller pointed out in his book, is in the finale. Now, the finale is surging along, it's like da, 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 it's doing all that stuff, right? And then the horns and oboes, which are supposed to balance each other, but usually you just hear the horns ripping away and no oboes, come in with ya, da, 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 da. And the orchestra's surging, going chung, 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 da, 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 ya, da, da, da. By the way, that's correct. It's not ya, da, 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 da. It's da, 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 wang, like that. And the first time I heard that, I went, oh, it's a mistake. What's wrong? Horns are cracking. Something's no. It's what Beethoven wrote. It's a badoing. It's really very strange. Most of the time, you don't really hear it very much, because it's one of those quirky things Beethoven often does in his music to make you sit up and take notice and not do what's expected. And underneath that, when the orchestra is going chung, 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 between those two statements of that theme on the horns and oboes, there is a bass line, a wonderful rushing bass line where the basses and cellos are going like that, and you almost never hear it. The timpani are rolling, fortissimo, everything's going on, there's all kinds of stuff happening. Some conductors make a big diminuendo so that you can hear it. It's very, very difficult to balance that line and, bring it out properly. But Dorati does. He doesn't reduce the energy of the orchestra that's going very much, just a little bit, so that, they get out of the way of the cellos and basses a little bit. But wow, it's so exciting when it's going do 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 like that, and it overlaps the entry of the second limb of that theme. So there are many passages here where you do hear interesting stuff happening at the bottom of the orchestra in the context of what is overall a beautifully exciting, wonderfully shaped performance. And I keep talking about the fifth, but the pastorelle on here is great as well. Absolutely fabulous. But boy, it's a bracing and vibrant Beethoven fifth with new things going on. And people who jump up and down and scream, Kleiber, 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 Kleiber. Carlos, that is, with the Vienna Philharmonic. You don't hear it with him. You don't hear it at all. And in fact, one of my objections to that Kleiber performance, exciting as it is and fabulously well played as it is, and all of those qualities that it has, is that it's a little surfacey. It really is. I'm used to having more prominence to fix the woodwind parts, the bass parts, things like that, And so there you go. This is unquestionably one of the greatest recordings ever. And not just because Gunther Schuller liked Dorati's Beethoven, but because Dorati's Beethoven is special and very, very rewarding still. And this one particularly is just wonderfully played and recorded by Mercury Living Presence. And yes, it belongs on your short list for sure. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.